All right, let's dive into one of the most powerful leadership stories ever told. We're going to unpack our raw story of self-doubt, of four very human objections, and of a divine calling from a desert thousands of years ago that, believe it or not, still echoes in our lives today. This is really the core question, isn't it? What happens when an infinite power taps a regular, flawed, and frankly unwilling person on the shoulder for a task that seems totally impossible? Well, it all starts not with a hero, but with a fugitive. You see, before Moses is the Moses, the great deliverer, he's a failure. He'd already tried to be a hero for his people, but he did it his own way, and it ended in disaster. Murder, actually. That forced him to flee for his life. Now he's just a shepherd, hiding out from his past. He is literally in the middle of nowhere, living a quiet life. Any grand ambitions he once had are long dead. And this is where the story kicks off. Not with some capable, ready-made leader, but with the most unlikely candidate you can imagine. A man who has every reason to think he's already disqualified himself. And then, something impossible happens. An event so strange, so out of place, that it forces this man in hiding to just stop, turn aside, and actually pay attention. Now, the specific detail that catches his eye is so crucial. It's not just a fire in the desert. Apparently, some of those oily bushes could sometimes just spontaneously combust. No, the miracle, the thing that compels him to walk over and investigate, is that the bush is engulfed in flames, but it isn't burning up. It's not turning to ash. And this just brilliantly illustrates the very first message God has for Moses, and really, for all of us. It's a direct answer to that fear that if you let God into your life, he'll just use you up, burn you out, and leave you as an ash. This bush is a promise. God's fire, his presence, it refines you, it illuminates, but it does not destroy you. So this is the very first command God gives him. Take off your sandals. And you have to wonder, why? It's because God's presence has transformed this ordinary patch of dirt. It wasn't special a moment ago, but now it is holy. This tells us something huge about the nature of the God who is speaking. You know, the word holy here doesn't mean morally perfect, not in the goody-goody way we often think of it. Its root meaning is way more staggering. It means completely different, separate, transcendent. This isn't just another force of nature. This is a being utterly distinct from the entire created universe. And it's this holy God who is about to give Moses his mission. So God lays out the plan. Go to Pharaoh, lead my people out of Egypt. And Moses, very reasonably, starts to object. And his arguments aren't just excuses. They are those deep-seated doubts that live in all of us when we face something that feels way bigger than ourselves. His first objection is completely personal. Who am I to do this? I mean, he's a nobody, a failed revolutionary, a shepherd. He's basically saying, you've got the wrong guy. I'm not capable. I don't have the status or the ability for this. And notice God's response. He doesn't give Moses a pep talk. He doesn't say, believe in yourself, Moses, you can do this. He completely bypasses the question of Moses' abilities. The answer isn't about who Moses is. It's about who is going with him. The crucial point is this. It's not about your ability. It's about God's presence. Moses' second objection is just as honest. Okay, let's say I go. When they ask me, who sent me? What am I supposed to say? I don't even know your name. He's pointing out a very real problem. His knowledge is too limited. And this response is one of the most powerful and mysterious statements in all of Scripture. It's not just a label. It's a statement of ultimate reality. It's God's very nature distilled into a name. So what does I am even imply? Well, first, it means God is the only being who exists entirely in himself, dependent on nothing. Second, he is eternal, existing outside of time in a constant present. And third, he is the source from which all other existence flows. This is the identity Moses gets to carry. But Moses isn't done. His doubts are practical, you know? They're rooted in the real world. And God continues to meet each objection, not with philosophy, but with actual demonstrations of his character and power. Now, this is a legitimate concern. What if I go and they say, the Lord has not appeared to you? Moses is worried about his own credibility. He has no authority, no credentials. So God's response is to give him signs, and these are not random magic tricks. In this culture, snakes and leprosy often symbolized evil and decay. So when Moses' staff becomes a snake that he can control, it demonstrates God's power over evil. And when his hand becomes diseased and is then instantly healed, it shows God's power to transform it. So now we're at the bottom line. After all the other objections have been answered, Moses falls back on his most personal bedrock insecurity. I'm not a good speaker. I'm slow of speech and tongue. This is his final, absolute I can't. And God's response here is just breathtaking. He says, in essence, Moses, who do you think designed the human mouth? I am the creator. And just like that, once again, the focus is pulled away from Moses' weakness and placed squarely on God's all-sufficient power. And this leads us to the core takeaway. Dr. Oswalt uses this beautiful analogy. A father building a birdhouse doesn't ask his 5-year-old son for help because he needs it. He knows he'll just be pulling out bent nails later. He invites his son to help because he wants to build a better boy. And the same way, God doesn't need our abilities. He wants to involve us in his work to make us better people. So Moses finally agrees. He's on his way. The argument seems settled. But the story has one final, shocking, and deeply strange scene that serves as the ultimate test. The text says that on the journey, the Lord met Moses and sought to put him to death. And you read that and think, wait, what is going on? Well, it turns out Moses is heading off to call an entire nation to covenant faithfulness, but he himself has neglected the primary sign of that covenant, the circumcision of his own son. The message is severe, but it is crystal clear. Leadership in God's work requires a total, sold-out commitment. You can't lead people where you aren't willing to go yourself. A divided heart, a partial obedience, isn't just insufficient, it's dangerous. And that leaves us with this final thought. Moses was a murderer, a fugitive, he was filled with self-doubt, and he was a poor speaker. None of that disqualified him. His inadequacy was the very stage on which God's power could be displayed. The only thing that nearly stopped him wasn't his inability, but his incomplete availability. So the question for us is the same. What are we holding back?